Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Maasrot. We're up to Perek Gimel Mishnah Hey. Today's Mishnah Yomi should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam beGan Eden, Amen. We learned in Mishnah number 1 in this chapter that once produce has been completely processed and brought into the owner's courtyard, it may not be eaten even as a snack until its Maasrot have been separated. Our Mishnah is going to teach us what kind of courtyard sets the obligation, because in general we know a courtyard does not set the maaser obligation until it provides privacy and protection in a way similar to a house, because the Mefarshim explain the Torah speaks of both a house and a courtyard in regards to the obligation of Maasrot. That shows us that a courtyard does not set the maaser obligation unless it's similar to a house, and that it provides privacy and protection. The Mishnah now is going to bring us a number of opinions regarding what level of protection and privacy is required. Which is the type of courtyard that is subject to the obligation of Maasrot, meaning which courtyard makes the produce that enters it fully subject to Maasrot and forbidden to snack on. Rabbi Yishmael says, Chatzer hatzurit shakelim nishmarim betocha, the courtyard like they used to have in Tzur, which Mefarshim says is a city in Lebanon, in which the utensils are protected by the person who stands guard over the courtyard, like in the courtyards of the city of Tzur. And the Mefarshim explain many of the residents in Tzur, which is a city in Lebanon, they were rich, and it was common for them to hire watchmen to guard their courtyards. According to Rabbi Yishmael, that's the type of level of privacy and protection you need for food produce that comes into it to become chayav in Maasrot. Rabbi Akiva says, Kol she'echad poteach ve'echad noel pitura. Any courtyard that when one person living in it opens the door, another person living in it comes and closes the door, that is not subject, meaning it does not establish the maaser obligation. And the Mefarshim explain a courtyard in which two people own homes and both have the right to decide when to keep the courtyard door open and when to keep it closed, that's not protected enough to set the maaser obligation. And the Mefarshim explain, because since the one who closes the door can never be sure that it will stay closed, it's not protected enough. Now, according to Rabbi Akiva, the Mefarshim explain, a courtyard does not set the maaser obligation unless there is just one person who decides when the door should be closed. However, if the courtyard is owned by one person and another person rents a home in it, Rabbi Akiva agrees that it's considered a protected courtyard, because the owner can overrule the renter when he wants and insist that the door be kept closed. So since one person's in control, it's considered guarded enough. Rabbi Nechemia says, any courtyard in which a person is not embarrassed to eat is subject to Maasrot, meaning whatever produce comes inside becomes chayav, because according to Rabbi Nechemia, a courtyard must provide enough privacy to allow a person to eat inside comfortably before it can establish a maaser obligation. And the Mefarshim explain, Rabbi Nechemia focuses more on the privacy provided by the courtyard rather than the protection it provides. He doesn't argue with the previous Tanaim, but he simply says, he puts forward another quality that makes a place into a courtyard in regards to this halakha of Maasrot. A courtyard that provides this level of privacy sets the maaser obligation, even if it doesn't have the level of protection mentioned by Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi says, Kol shenichnas lah ve'en omer lo ma ata mevakesh petura. Any courtyard that a stranger enters without being told, what are you looking for, that is not subject, it does not set the maaser obligation because it's not private enough. And the Mefarshim explain, even if the owner of the courtyard is not embarrassed to eat there, the fact that strangers can walk in without being challenged, that makes it not private. Rabbi Yehuda says, if there are two courtyards, one inside the other, so that people living in the inner courtyard must walk through the outer one to get to the street, the inner courtyard is subject, and the outer one is not subject. And the Mefarshim explain, the inner courtyard is considered protected because it can prevent the people from the outer one from entering it, which the Mefarshim explain because they can lock the door between their courtyard and the outer one, because the residents of the outer one have no right to enter the inner one. So since the inner one can be locked, it's considered private enough, but the outer one is not considered protected because it cannot prevent the people from the inner one from going through it to get to and from the street, because the people on the outer courtyard, the Mefarshim explained, they cannot block the residents of the inner one from entering, because they have the right to go through the outer one to get to and from the street. But the outer ones have no right to go into the inner one. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says the inner one is subject and the outer one is not. And the Rav tells us, Halakha ki divrei kulan achmir, the Kaimalan in Masechet Nida, page 47b, we hold the halakha is like the words of all the opinions to be strict. And that is in Rabotai of Mishnah. Hey, Mishnah Vav now is going to teach us which other areas outside the house are considered like a courtyard in regards to setting the maaser obligation. Hagagot piturin. Rooftops are not subject to the maaser obligation, meaning they do not set the maaser obligation for produce that is brought up to them. And the Mefarshim explain if produce is brought up to the rooftop without growing through the house, it does not set the maaser obligation, because the rooftop of the house is not like the house itself. Afal pi shem shel chatzer chayevet. Even if they are on top of houses in a courtyard that is subject to the obligation, and he brought the produce through the courtyard to the rooftop, nevertheless it's exempt, because since he brought the produce into the courtyard with the intention of taking it up to the rooftop to eat it there, the courtyard does not set the maaser obligation, because the Rav says a courtyard sets the maaser obligation only if what is brought into it will be eaten in the courtyard or the house. Now, the Mefarshim point out, we learned in Mishnah number 1 that when figs are brought to a courtyard on their way to being dried, they remain permitted for snacking only because a courtyard cannot set the obligation for something that has not yet been fully processed. That implies that when something is fully processed and it comes through a courtyard, it becomes forbidden for snacking even though it's on its way to somewhere else. Now, the Tana of our Mishnah obviously disagrees with Mishnah Alayev, because he says that as long as you're going through the courtyard and you're not stopping there, you can snack on it. It doesn't become obligated in Maasrot. The Mishnah continues, Bet Sha'ar Achsadra Umirpeset, a gatehouse, which is a small structure in front of the entrance to a courtyard, a Achsadra, which is a covered porch with 3 walls and 1 open side, and a Milpeset, a gallery, which is a walkway in front of the apartments on the 2nd floor of a building, which Mefarshim explain, a ladder or stairway leads from the courtyard up to the gallery. People live on the 2nd floor. They enter their homes by going through the courtyard, up the stairs to the gallery, and from there into their apartments. It's basically stairs going up to a structure that would be their apartments. These are all like courtyards that they are next. They are like the courtyards that they're next to. Im chayevet chayevin. If the courtyard that's next to these structures is the type that is subject to the obligation of Maasrot, then these structures are also subject to the obligation. V'im pitura piturim. If the courtyard that these structures are next to is not the type that is subject to the Maasrot obligation, then they are also not subject. They're exempt from the Maasrot obligation until they're brought into the home. Now, the Mefarshim explain these structures are considered to be extensions of the courtyard, therefore they have the same status as the courtyards that are next to them. And that is not Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.